were they on the ground out there?
Yeah? Okay, so does everyone mind if I get a quick picture? Just we're gonna put on the meetup page as well. Smile. Just smile real quick.
Two chairs on the side.
So, I guess we're gonna turn over to James here. He's gonna give us everything we need to know about how to sell on Amazon, or at least what we can do in 2 hours.
From my perspective.
From his perspective.
All right, quick question. How many of you guys were here for my January presentation? So, 1, 2, 3. All right, so we have a fairly new crowd here. Okay, that's fine. And so, what I'm gonna do is some of the stuff that the people that were here in January, you may have seen some of this. We'll about halfway through the presentation, what I'll do is more so start focusing on some of the updates that I've had since the original January presentation. All right. So this is the Amazon Meetup. You know, one of the things that everybody has their own flavor as it relates to selling on. So there's private label, there's wholesaling, and there's retail arbitrage. Retail arbitrage meaning either you're buying and selling from like a Walmart or a Target and selling it on Amazon, or you're doing it online, which is more of an online arbitrage. So what I'm here to focus on is wholesaling. And basically with wholesaling, if you look at this pyramid here, you can see wholesale kind of falls in the middle between private label and retail arbitrage. So in many cases, it's the best of both worlds. And I will talk about that because there's pros and cons of each. Let's talk about retail arbitrage first. So people who have done, how many people in this room have done retail arbitrage? All right, so there's a lot of hands already going up. And so retail.
Sorry, quick question. Is anybody not signed in?
Over here.
Okay. So that's what I'm saying. Thank you, sorry.
No problem. So with retail arbitrage, many of the pros for retail arbitrage, again, there's a low barrier to entry. Pretty much anybody can get into this. If there's a sale online, if there's a sale at Target or Walmart, you can take that item, scan it with your app, and figure out, hey, whether or not this is something that will actually sell on Amazon. It's really easy to set up. Again, a low startup cost, and profit margins can be really high, especially on those after Christmas sales or those any after holiday quote unquote type sales when items are deeply discounted. You can find a lot of items to sell at a pretty good margin on Amazon. The problem with retail arbitrage, however, is that it's very hard to scale because if you don't have an assortment of employees to really go out and find those deals on a day-to-day basis, you're kind of stuck with just the manpower of one person. Again, it's really hard to replenish inventory. It's really hard to replenish inventory because a lot of times with retail arbitrage, it's opportunity buys. It's stuff that is on sale today. There's a bargain bin at the store, and you can get those items out of that bargain bin, but there's probably not a good chance to actually replenish it. Again, I already talked about it's labor intensive. There's lots of competition. Well, there's beginning to be a lot of competition, especially in this area. I think I remember at one meetup, someone stated that they went in they do a lot of retail arbitrage at a particular store, and there was a lot of other people around doing the exact same thing. So the word is out for retail arbitrage. So you're gonna get a lot of competition. Wholesaling. So wholesaling, remember that triangle? So wholesaling kind of falls somewhere in the middle. What I really like about wholesaling is that the fact of the matter, you can replenish your inventory on a pretty consistent basis. You can buy case lots of items, and so instead of buying maybe 5 items in what you normally do for like a retail arbitrage setup, you could buy 100 of those items because you're buying directly from a distributor instead of buying from the retailer. A lot of times your suppliers or your distributors, they will ship the items directly into Amazon for you. So again, that kind of takes you out of the loop as it relates to actually touching the item and prepping the item. A lot of times your suppliers will do that for you. It's very easy to scale, and there's lots of opportunities to get exclusive accounts with people who are, in many cases, that they may be like private labelers who don't know much about scaling their business online on Amazon. They may be willing to partner with you. Some of the cons, again, with wholesaling is that sometimes there's a lot more capital needed. Well, there's definitely a lot more capital needed as it relates if you were to compare wholesale versus retail arbitrage. You usually have to buy a lot more items. So again, I use that example, 5 items at Walmart versus 100 items from a distributor. So you can understand that there's going to be capital required. Another thing, there's typically the profit margins aren't as great with retail arbitrage. I mean, not as great as retail arbitrage. However, one caveat is that although the profit margins may be lower, you can make it up in volume. And it's also a higher risk of making mistakes versus retail arbitrage because you have more skin in the game as it relates to your capital. And pretty much, how many people in this room know about private labeling? Or don't know about private labeling? I should ask it that way. So private labeling is basically when you take you take a product and you create your own product, and when you're creating your own product and selling it on Amazon for the very first time. So nobody knows your product, you're putting it out there. There's a lot of capital risk with that. However, some of the pros for it is that you can probably most likely order the product at a very, very cheap price, usually from China or maybe some smaller distributors here in the US, private label that and then sell it online. The biggest thing is that getting people interested in your product. So there's a lot of cash outlay as it relates to advertising that product. Let's see. There's usually actually higher initial investment because you end up having to source the product, package the product, and get it all shipped into Amazon as in comparison to what you were doing in retail arbitrage or wholesale. So again, let's go back. Why do I like wholesaling? So I say it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. You can start with an established product that you don't have to create from a private label standpoint, but also there's built-in demand for that product. So for instance, a wholesaling product would be like you have Aquafina water right there. Everybody a lot more people will know about Aquafina water versus Joe's spring water over here. That's one of the things that are built in. I see you back there, Ryan. But what was I about to say? So yeah, so there's built-in demand for wholesale items. So one thing I really like about wholesale is that when I put a product out online, you don't typically have to pay for advertising. And that's something that if you were doing private labeling and launching a brand new product, you're advertising on Facebook, you're advertising on Amazon, you're sometimes giving away units just to spur demand. You don't have to do that with wholesale because the demand is already there. I mean, how many times people buy things like soap online or like Dove soap or those little Tide Pods. Like these are items that people buy all the time. You don't have to advertise them because they're gonna know or go to their grocery store to get those items anyway. So I say all of that. So what is needed to get started? So with anything on selling on Amazon, first thing you're gonna need is your Amazon professional selling account. And that's mainly because you need to have a professional account because you're gonna be selling via FBA. And so in order to sell FBA, meaning that Amazon is actually going to fulfill the product for you, you need to have a professional selling account. The next thing you're gonna need is go ahead.
Sorry, real quick, are you gonna share these slides?
Yes. Yeah, at the end of this, I will share these slides, so you don't have to take a picture of each slide. You can share it. I'll share all of these. Next thing you need is a resale certificate. So in North Carolina, or in any state, anytime you're dealing with a distributor or a supplier, the first thing they're gonna ask you is whether or not you have a reseller certificate. And what that allows you to do is buy the item from the supplier tax-free. And so you only have to remit sales tax when you yourself actually sell the product. And so this is a link, and again, I'll give you these slides, okay, where you can actually go and get your wholesale certificate in North Carolina. It's actually, I thought I would have to pay to get this. It's actually not. You don't have to pay. It's pretty much like maybe a 10-minute process of just filling out some forms online, and they'll give you your certificate right there. Not your certificate. They'll give you your reseller ID once you go through the forms, but your official form will come in the mail about 10 days later. And then another thing, this is not you don't have to have this to start, but it's nice to have, is a professional web and email presence. So this is my brand, it's Artemis Home Brands. And as you can see, my name, ali.hales@artemishomebrands.com. The reason I wanted a professional website and email is so that when I approach suppliers or distributors, they don't see me as this random guy who wants to sell their products. It looks like it's a more professional brand. So the next question you may have, well, where do I find these suppliers? Okay, well, one of the first places I looked online and started seeing a lot of suppliers was a site called wholesalecentral.com. Now, it's a good starting point. However, what I found with a lot of those suppliers from that particular site, their wares aren't that great. I mean, their products aren't that great. Either the products that they're selling have very, very small margins, or the products aren't really in demand. And so you can still find some good suppliers there, but they're few and far between. So the next thing you may want to look at is our supplier list.
You said authorized suppliers. What do you mean by authorized?
Okay. Authorized suppliers, that's actually a very good question. An authorized supplier is a supplier who is basically authorized, there's a term for it, and I forget the term, but basically a supplier who is authorized to sell your product to other people and other wholesalers. So there is what is it called?
They're
Like
authorized
distributor?
through the manufacturer to sell that product. It's like you can't sell Disney products online unless you're an authorized Disney reseller.
Right.
Certified, is that the word?
Certified or authorized, they kind of go hand in hand, but there's another term that it has something to do with, it's like a legal term relating to the ability to sell it. That's not even really important. I'm not even going to say all that. But that's basically what I'm saying. A supplier is authorized to sell the particular goods from a particular manufacturer.
Do any of these suppliers need to be authorized or certified or approved by Amazon?
So Amazon, yes. So Amazon, they won't tell you exactly how or who the authorized suppliers are, but what I've found is that Amazon maintains this master list, and they know who is authorized to sell what product. And actually, I'm going to get to that in a second. But Amazon, anytime, especially if you're trying to sell a product that you are gated for, a lot of times Amazon will ask you, well, hey, can you send me an invoice from your manufacturer, from your supplier, stating that you actually got this from a legitimate source. And Amazon will cross-reference your invoice against their database of suppliers, and will either allow you or not allow you to sell their product based on what they find. Where was I? Supplier lists. So supplier lists are, again, another place that you can actually find suppliers. And I've actually, over the last few months, I've started utilizing a lot of these supplier lists, and depending on where you get them from, they can be actually pretty lucrative, and or there are some suppliers on there that you normally may not find. And so what some people do is they collect all these suppliers and they basically sell lists. Some lists go for, maybe it's 50 suppliers in a baby niche for $100. Or some people will sell like 1,000 suppliers in various niches for maybe $700-800. I'm not saying that you have to do that. I didn't start off doing that, but I just wanted to let you know, hey, those lists are there. And then the way that I originally started and actually found some really good suppliers is just doing this. Google UPC code plus plus wholesale. And that simple string right there has allowed me to find many suppliers that I normally would not have found on Google. So with this UPC code at the beginning, that's just if you're looking to sell something, say you're looking to sell that Aquafina water, look at the UPC code, add that UPC code into Google plus wholesale, and a lot of times the first page of searches that are returned are actually wholesalers for that particular UPC code. I found like these UPC codes are 3 products that I was selling or either looking to sell, and I got supplier accounts just for this query string. And this was another one. Doesn't work as well as the UPC codes, but you can just Google the product name plus wholesale. A lot of times it'll give you wholesalers. However, those wholesalers I would say are kind of like maybe third tier wholesalers, meaning that they are wholesalers that have purchased a product from another wholesaler, which has purchased a product from another wholesaler, and they've added so much margin that when you try to sell it online on Amazon, it's not worth it anymore. So most people try to do this, but a lot of really good wholesale accounts can be found just by using this query string on Google. So, authorized supplier examples. So here are actually some suppliers. I'm very open, so I will share a lot of things. So here in just my research, these are some authorized suppliers. So Hanes brand, Hanes sells so many different products, from underwear to socks to, athletic apparel, so on and so forth. If you go there, Hanes has a B2B website that you can just sign up and become an authorized, that they're an authorized supplier. You become a distributor of their products. Netgear has an authorized reseller program. And what you'll find with Netgear or any type of electronics, usually the margins aren't as great. However, with a lot of their older items, so say there's a router that came out 2-3 years ago, some of those things still relatively hold their value, and so you may be able to find some margins on those items. Kimberly-Clark is a huge one, and so again, I'll give you all of these in the slides, but they're a huge retailer of just home goods, home supplies, things like your paper towels, maybe paper towels is a big thing, but things like that. And CNH, they sell a lot of books. They sell like college books, things like that. So I just wanted to bring those out. Here's additional suppliers. I actually used a few of those. D&H, Petra, Ingram Micro. They sell a lot of electronics. Some sell video games, things like that. So I'm just basically giving you suppliers that I have found that I have used and are used right now. So just throw that out there. This was a YouTube link of a guy who was actually talking about how to find suppliers as well. And I think you guys would find that very beneficial. He was giving away suppliers that he's found and that I've kind of vetted, and some are actually pretty good as well. So once you found your suppliers, you have their phone number, what do you do next? So you can contact them in 3 ways. You can call them directly, you can email them, or a lot of times on their site they'll have like a contact form. And so what I like to do, to be honest, is just be direct. Call them and pick up the phone and say, hey, I am Ollie Hales. Well, don't say this, but this is what I typically say. I'm Ollie Hales from Artemis Home Brands. I see that you guys are carrying these types of products. We're looking to expand our line into X niche or whatever, and we see that you have these particular products. We would like to set up an account with your company. Then typically what happens is like, okay, they'll ask, do you have a resale certificate? I say yes, and they'll ask me to email it to them, and usually within a couple of days, you'll have an account with them. Usually that is that fast. Email typically takes a little bit longer, so you can email a lot of them. Typically, the more responsive ones, you can probably get an account open within a week. The contact forms, they're hit and miss. Sometimes you'll find a supplier who actually monitors those contact forms. Sometimes you won't. So I find that usually with contact forms, I'm looking about maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks before I hear anything back. So basically the purpose of this slide is basically say, call them when you can, and the second thing I would do is email them. But also make sure you email them from, again, a professional looking email account, not your name at gmail.com. They'll still reply, but it looks more professional if you have a professional domain. Here's an example of this, my email contact script. I'll say, again, basically what I stated earlier. I'm Ollie Hills. I represent the company Articles Home Brands. We're interested in carrier products. And basically, I'll talk them up and say, hey, I heard from great reviews from products that you've had, and I'm just asking them to carry their line. So I walked you through the process of opening up an Amazon account, getting a wholesaler account, contacting suppliers. Now that you have an account with the supplier, what happens next? Well, the first things you want to do is find out what are the minimum order quantities for a supplier. And typically they'll tell you anywhere between $250 to $500 to really get their minimum order. And one of the things you want to find out, do they ship directly to Amazon? Because if they don't, then that means that if you're ordering all these products in bulk, you're gonna have to send it to yourself and then prep it and send it over to Amazon. Or send it to a prep center and send it to Amazon. So your costs are gonna be a little bit higher than what's quoted on their website as it relates for the cost of an item. Then you want to obtain like a UPC code
I'm sorry, you said about shipping directly to Amazon, so for the ones that do you do commingled then? Or do you do stickers and have Amazon do it?
So typically, if they send directly to Amazon, this is just from my experience, it's almost as though if I was prepping it myself, I don't necessarily do commingled. I'll say, well, hey, they usually, do they palletize? Everybody's a little bit different. So that's almost like it depends question. But in my situation, I will have them only send one SKU at a time, because a lot of times I'm only ordering one SKU at that moment in time. And so there's no need for me to necessarily commingle. But lately I've switched my model over, so it's totally different now. So I don't have to deal with that. Go ahead.
I'm not sure what commingle means, but
No, I'm sorry.
Sorry?
But I was gonna ask it about quality control.
Mhm.
Do you have any interchange with them about if they would ship directly, then where are you with quality control?
Right, okay, so when I first start with a new supplier, I'll send it directly to my home first. And I will quality check it. I ran into this issue with one of my suppliers on a product a few months ago. And I'm so glad that I did quality control or quality check it, because it looks like the item had been in their warehouse and dry rotted. And so I ended up having to send a lot of that back. I mean, they paid for it, so they were fine. I took pictures and they said, well, hey, it was our fault. But had I sent it to Amazon, that would have hurt my credibility. So after that situation, I ordered a few more items for them and things look fine. And so at this point, I don't have a problem sending it to Amazon. Actually, what I do now is I send it to a prep center. They do the quality control for me. Then it goes out to Amazon. Okay.
What is the cost for that prep center?
So prep centers, every prep center is going to have a different price. The original prep center that I started with, they charged me 89 cents per item. And then they had tiers. So first it was like 89 cents for, say, 100, I think it was like 200 items. And if I hit like the 500 items mark, they dropped it down to like 79 cents. Then if I went over, I forget, another certain amount, they would drop it down like another 10 cents. And so that prep center was out of Michigan. I don't work with them anymore. Actually, I have them in the slide, but I don't work with them anymore. There's another prep center I found out in Oxford, and they only charge me 49 cents per item. So half the cost. So where was I? Any more questions before I go?
Can you take your own pictures and just write your own description, or do you have to have like theirs?
So the whole point of doing wholesale is that you don't have to do all of that stuff. A lot of the descriptions are already written. Now you can actually go and improve them if you like, but in many cases, your time is probably better used finding more products. Because think about it, what you're basically doing is going out on listings that are already there, they're already established. Say like, for instance, Spyro video game on from PlayStation. Like that description is already written. I don't have to rewrite that description anymore or optimize it. You know, I'm just adding my PlayStation games or my copies to that description, and they're selling. So you can, however, I don't say you spend your time doing it. There's a hand back there.
I was just gonna say, it's like, repeat the question, sometimes we can't do it.
Okay, yeah, his question was about optimizing the listing, taking on his own pictures of the items and things like that. You don't typically have to, especially if you find products that are already selling well. A lot of times there's no need to really optimize the listing. It's better just to find new products. Okay, so when you get an account with a supplier, the very next thing that's gonna happen is they're gonna give you, or you're gonna ask them for an Excel spreadsheet of all of their SKUs. And these SKUs are gonna have their pricing information, they're gonna have their MAP or their minimum advertised pricing information on that spreadsheet, if there is one, and the name and just a lot of information about the product. And so what you'll find is that, and I'll get to that in a second, like once you have this information, you can start cross-referencing the SKUs and the prices with Amazon. And the last thing you want to do is ask them for, are they in a price discount threshold? So if you order more than $1,000, are you going to get a certain amount off per unit, and so on and so forth. So here's an example of what a supplier file looks like. So you'll get something like this from a supplier. So do you think if you got something like this, you know what to do with it? So the next thing you need to do is scan that file. And so there's a couple of products that I use. I actually use Wholesale Inspector. I use and AMZ Analyzer. They both have their pros and cons. I like a Wholesale Inspector because it's fast. But if you're just now starting off and you want to go a cheaper route, the AMZ Analyzer is just fine. But what these scanners do is they'll take a file, an Excel spreadsheet, and mind you, a lot of these Excel spreadsheets may have 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 20,000 items on that list. And what it'll do is take that and cross-reference each one of the UPC codes on that spreadsheet with the prices on Amazon, and also will tell you how much you can possibly look to make off of that item. Actually calculating Amazon fees and even your shipping rates if you know that. Questions? So some people, I know in the back you may not be able to see this, but
That's funny in the back, yeah, right. People in the middle can't see it. Is there something up there?
Yeah, so this is kind of like this is the output from the Wholesale Inspector. And again, I'll give you these slides so you can actually look at it in more detail. But what it'll do is it'll tell you, like, for instance, the name of the item, what the cost is from the supplier, what the Amazon buy box price, and what your profits actually will look like if you were to purchase it. It'll also tell you the amount of sales that you can expect for that particular item, the number of sellers, and based on the number of sellers, how many sales you could possibly get if you purchase that item. So these are very powerful tools because it basically speeds up that process. Once you know, hey, I can buy this item, so on and so forth, and I can expect this amount of profit, at that point it's just easy. I don't say easy, but easy relative.
And the cheaper one does this too?
The cheaper one does it as well. It's just not as fast. Like this, I could take an 80,000 list UPC, 80,000 UPC list and probably process it within maybe 5 minutes with wholesale inspector, that same list may take a couple of hours with AMZ Analyzer. So that's why I'm like, I'm all about speed.
I'm assuming they'll provide Excel output, right?
Yes. So most suppliers will give you Excel.
But I mean.
Oh, you mean the tool?
Yeah.
Yeah, the tools, yeah. They're all Excel, based. They're either CSV or Excel.
Output, right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Any questions for the board? Just trust me that this is there if you can't see it.
It's magic.
So when I filter my scan, so what am I looking for? I'm looking for, let me back up, let me ask this question. How many of you guys do any of you guys know what BSR is? Or who doesn't know what BSR is? Let me ask the question. Okay, so BSR is your bestseller rank on Amazon. And typically, the lower that number, the more items are actually gonna be sold. So if you have a BSR of say 100, that could actually translate into maybe 3,000 or 4,000 units in a month being sold. But if you have a BSR of 1,000 or 2,000 or 20,000, they may only translate to 200 items being sold. So it's kind of it's counterintuitive. The lower the number, the more items are sold. So knowing that, I try to stick. Well, back in January when I actually gave this presentation, I tried to stick with a BSR of 110,000 or higher. That I would actually say that when I say higher, that means that the lower the number. Sorry.
It is always confusing.
Yeah, it's very confusing. But anything from 110,000 and less than that number, I will stick to. But now, what I try to do is I'm looking for more higher velocity items. So I'll try to stay in the 10,000, 1 to 10,000 range when I'm looking for products.
So whether you're using the 110 or 1 to 10, isn't that really dependent upon the category?
Yes, but what I found is like I found that it's kind of category agnostic because the tool actually tells you how many items are going to be sold anyway.
Right.
And so I just set my query up for that, and I pretty much capture most of what I'm looking for at least.
Gotcha.
What I do also is I try to sort from highest reviews to lowest, because usually the number of reviews actually correlates to the amount of items being sold. And then I try to remove all products sold by Amazon. However, again, this was my view back in January. I no longer do that because I figured out you can't compete against Amazon, even from a wholesale standpoint. And then I try to look for items that give me a per profit greater than or equal to $3 per item.
That's not margin, that's profit.
That's profit.
Right.
Yeah, I'm talking all
That's all
profits.
the costs, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So next thing you want to do, if you found items that you can't sell, you're going to need invoices. And so here's an example. I was selling. I don't know if any of you guys heard of Kong. They are a brand that sells a lot of dog toys or dog chewies and things like that. Well, I found that Kong sells really well on Amazon, but Amazon actually gated me for this. And so how you get past that is you get an invoice from your supplier showing that you purchased at least, I think right now it's at least 10 items, and shows that your company name is on there. So this is my company name. It shows that when this order was actually placed, because usually they want it within 6 months of when you're trying to get ungated, and the item that you're trying to get ungated for. So I took this, I created a PDF version of this invoice, and I sent it on into Amazon, and a few days later I got approved. They sent me this saying, hey, you were brand approved.
And why were you gated? Sorry?
So Kong is one of those companies that it's not an automatically ungate, they don't automatically ungate all sellers. And so at least, I don't know if that's a Kong thing or if that's more of an Amazon thing, but I was gated for it, and I just needed to send them an invoice and show that it worked out.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kelly.
When did you find out you were gated? Like when you tried to add to the listing before you sent the stuff in,
Yes,
or
okay.
after?
Let's back up too. So that's actually a really good question. Before you purchase a product, try to add that product into your account before you purchase it, and that will let you know whether or not you are authorized to sell that product or not. Because if you don't, you end up buying that product and it turns out you can't sell it. Your question?
So we're talking about gated or restricted. Now, we have restricted gated categories.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like we have restricted or gated companies.
Mm-hmm.
And the instance, and then would we have gated or restricted products? I mean, all three exist?
So usually, we think. So from this standpoint, when I was ungated for Com, I was able to sell all of their products.
Okay.
So I'm thinking it's at the company level.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think from experience. Have I seen a product that I had to do? Yeah, I want to, maybe it's at the company level. Anybody else can chime in, because I'm not quite certain. But I think it's again, in my case, it was the company level.
So you might have been able to sell those sorts of products from another company,
Yes,
but with Com, you had to get ungated.
correct.
Apparently it wasn't real hard.
Yeah, it wasn't. Now, actually, in this case, let me tell you what happened. And this is something that you guys probably need to know. I attempted to get ungated with that invoice, and a few days, or I think within a day or so, they came back and said, no, we're not gonna ungate you for this. You know, you need they basically kicked my invoice back saying it wasn't from an authorized seller. I tried again, they still kicked it back. I tried a third time, they ungated me. And what I noticed on each one of the emails, it was the same person denied me the first two times, and then a totally different person allowed me to go through. So I was just watching. So I guess how they
Third
felt.
time's a charm.
Yeah, and that happened with Pokemon as well. So. So if you get, so basically the gist of that story is that if you run into a situation where your invoice does not ungate you, wait an hour, wait a day, try again.
Why would they, what would be the reason for them to?
They don't tell you. They don't tell you. Well, I got the generic response saying that it needed to be from an authorized supplier. And I knew that this company was an authorized supplier, but this person didn't feel that way. And so they denied me a couple of times, and then I tried later, and another person was like, yeah, that's fine.
It must have been a Tuesday or something.
Their dog chewed up the
I don't know.
Would they do something like that if there were too many of those items being sold on Amazon? Or, is there such a thing as flooding Amazon with a certain
I don't
product?
think so, because I've seen products where there's like 50 to 100 people on there, so I don't think that really matters. I think really it's just the supplier and sometimes the whim of the person that's approving you that day.
Well, the process you went through to get it ungated, is that something Amazon advertises and tells you this is what you do if you want?
Yes.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
they'll actually tell you, hey, we need an invoice from a supplier or manufacturer, and they'll tell you how many items that they want on that invoice before they'll actually look at it to ungate or unrestrict you.
I have two very basic questions because I'm just getting into this and just learning about private label. I don't know anything about wholesaling. This is completely new. I want to be sure I'm understanding. So wholesaling is when you're selling an established product.
Yes.
Okay. And the second question is, if you have an account, can you do both private label and wholesaling? And
Yes. Yes. So yes, you can. I will caution you, especially if you want to do private label and maybe retail arbitrage, try to keep those separate. Because I ran into a situation where, and I did this, and I'm glad I did this. I wanted to make sure that my private label and my wholesale account, they were, private label and wholesale, I don't really see an issue with. It's the RA side of things where Amazon can really, kick you in the butt. Because a lot of times, sometimes with RA, they'll ask you for an authorized supplier invoice, and you can't give them a Walmart receipt to say that. And so they'll shut you down if you don't have, they can't shut you down if you don't have all that information. And that's what happened to me with an account that was strictly RA. and I was able to get by it, but I didn't want that to affect my main account, so I kept them separate.
Does that apply when you're producing your own products?
That's what she was stating. So,
Oh.
well, actually, no, that's not.
Like if you are taking, like let's say you take a raw product and then you're basically like, well,
Your private labeling.
yeah, you're a
product.
private label and you rebrand it, you take it apart and you put it back together again,
Mhm.
being your own thing.
Mhm.
Does that apply?
That doesn't apply then because that's your brand, that's your product. You're creating that listing, so that's all. That all comes from you.
Okay.
So it's only when you're, I guess, piggybacking on somebody else's listing that a brand owner may want it either restricted or Amazon will look at that more in depth.
That was kind of what I was gonna ask too, because in our conversation earlier, where I'm processing the product, and it has a brand, and I'm the.
You're the brand
I'm the
owner.
brand owner, but I'm selling, so how, I mean, am I considered selling
So
wholesale,
you're,
or I consider selling?
so based on our conversation, you're the private labeler because that's your brand.
That's my brand.
That's yours. So you, from that standpoint, you wouldn't have to worry about any of this because you own it.
But then if you were to pick up my line and sell it,
Mhm.
then you would be wholesaling my product.
I would be wholesaling yours.
And we could both do that.
Yeah, we can
So
both
if you
do it.
want my line.
Yeah, we could both do it. I
Pick
can
up my line, it's for something.
But you can actually get yourself brand registered and you can restrict me or restrict your brand to people that Amazon, that you would have to show Amazon those receipts or those invoices in order to get ungated, similar to like what I ran into. There's another question.
This is sort of different. How would you get people to sell your stuff for you? Or the opposite?
At a low level, what you can do, like, we're at a meetup here, and you can say, hey, I have a brand. Anybody, there's some Amazon sellers in here. Do you want to sell my product? I mean, you could say, at the most simplest level. At the, I guess, the bigger level, you're gonna actually have to approach like a distributor and see if they would be willing to take on your brand. But I think by that, when you're approaching a distributor, you have to really show that, hey, my brand is actually a product that's actually selling. And I'm not sure of the numbers because I've never had to do that before. And the next step, again, so once you figured out your supplier, you identify the product, the next thing you want to do is send that product into Amazon. So at this point, what I suggest, and I still feel the same way, from January, if you know that the product is going to be selling well, buy at least a 30-day supply, because that'll get you into Amazon. That'll actually show you that you can actually see how fast your products will be selling, and then you can also kind of coordinate your lead time, understanding how long it'll take for a 30-day supply to get into Amazon. When I first started out, again, I used to send things directly to my home. Now what I tend to do is send it directly to a fulfillment center, and the first fulfillment center on this list is the one I initially worked with. That was a Michigan FBA prep. ShipOnTime.com is actually the one that's right out here in Oxford, and they have really competitive pricing. And Ryan Meltz, this was from, I think, Ryan, you're starting a fulfillment or a FBA prep center at some point?
You can take off the tail now.
Take off the tail?
So it's focused on used books, because no prep centers, at least in this area, will touch used books. They all do what you're talking about.
Okay. So Ryan Meltz, if you have used books, he is the guy for you. A few things that you want to look at. You remember Keepa, how many people have used Keepa before? Okay, so Keepa's not free. But at the time, what you want to use, if you are still using Keepa, I would suggest when you are identifying a product to sell on Amazon, don't just look at like 1 month data. Try to look back in the past, maybe 6 months to a year, to determine whether or not Amazon was actually on that listing. And same way, and also determine whether or not the price stayed stable. And you can use Keepa and Camel for that. Realistic expectations for wholesale. The average profit range is going to be anywhere from 10% to 30%. You can have, every so often, like those opportunity buys, you have opportunity buys inside of wholesale. You can have profits up to 100%, but typically those items don't sell as fast, but they're there. And again, with wholesale, it's a numbers game. The more items you have out there on your account to sell, the more you typically will make.
You mentioned earlier the electronics that you typically have a big margin, but are there things that you think are, you know, better or things to stay away from in terms of profitability?
From my experience, like things that are consumables, like your home items, like I said, let me not say that. I can't say that I've identified a particular niche outside of electronics that has, you know, guaranteed high margins. But what I can say, from at least from my experience, electronics seems to be the area where the margins are the slimmest, especially new electronics. Now, stuff that has been discontinued, that's a different story.
Right.
But new electronics, the margins seem to be really slim.
Okay. Thank you.
And so these are some examples that I gave back in January when I was selling. So these were some menstrual cups that I found from a supplier. Now, mind you, I'll talk about this in a second, but this particular supplier, they were selling these menstrual cups for $20.96 a piece. I could sell them on Amazon for $34. I was only making $1.73 profit. That, I look back now, that was probably not the best item to go after. But I was really excited about jumping into wholesale, so I took the leap in.
Over what period of time did you?
Let me see. These sold really fast. This was pretty much over I think that was about 2 months.
2 months? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Is the 633, was that your sales? Or was that the?
So that's the amount of units. No, that was my sales.
Your sales?
Yeah.
I wanted to be sure.
Yeah, so yeah, the unit sales are the amount of actually that I sold. So that was over a 3 month time. No, 2 months time frame. I do remember that one. This was a better profit example over the same period. You see the ROI is about 17%. That's a lot better than the other items. You can see I sold 764. One of the things about this item, Amazon actually jumped on the listing toward the end because I was selling this at a higher price. Because I'm looking at the price, I'm like, I sold it for higher than that. Amazon jumped on the listing and kind of brought the price down. And so what I ended up doing is just selling out of the product.
And when you say selling out of the product, you mean you drop the price to
I dropped
move
the
your
price
inventory?
to move the units, right? So that's why, because I think the ROI on this would have been in the over the 20% range. And when they came on, they ended up dropping it. It hurt me.
So again, when I'm looking at wholesale costs, you put out $14,000, and then when all is said and done, what you cleared in your pocket was $2,483.
Correct. Okay. So, yeah. So with wholesale, a lot of times you got to have, you know, bigger pockets in order to make this work. Well, so I thought. I'll get to that point in a second. And here's another example. I'm going to speed up. This example, Amazon jumped on the listing. I wasn't following my rules. I would have saw that on the keeper graph. Amazon was just out of stock for a short period of time. And this is what happened when you don't pay attention.
Just so you know, that when you said that in January, I've mentioned that in every class at Wake Tech now about how you made that mistake. Because we talk about making mistakes.
Yeah.
And how you learn from it and don't do that anymore.
Right.
Right.
I don't do
So
that
thank you
anymore. I still make mistakes, but
Right.
I don't do that anymore.
But we learn from them, yes.
Okay. So I've updated you. That ends the presentation I did in January. So let me give you some updates as it relates to what I'm planning now.
You changed your hair.
Yes. All right. So Keeper's not free anymore. We all know that. The first thing I want to talk about, how many of you guys have heard of Helium-10? Okay, so Helium-10, if you aren't using Helium-10, use it. It's a free plugin. It gives you a lot of the same data that the Keeper graphs used to, except for and maybe if you guys use it, I don't really see much of like Amazon on it. And so I still use the old Keepa, the free Keepa portion to kind of tell if Amazon's on that listing. One thing I do like about Keepa, how many of you guys have used this portion of Keepa? I'll talk about that in a second. But if you have your Keepa graph, there's something on the graph that says inventory levels. And what I do is I use that to stalk my competition. So I can tell how many items of inventory they have. Now, a lot of tools, some do this same thing, but a lot of times you have to pay for it or it's not very efficient. I like Helium 10 because it has everything in the graph, and it just brings this up. This is just, and shows you how many items that a person has for any particular product.
Sorry, you said you made a mistake, but I didn't catch what the mistake was.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I said he made a mistake.
So this right here. So early on, I think I mentioned using Keepa to determine whether or not Amazon has been on a listing before. One of the reasons why you don't, at the time, typically want to compete against Amazon is because Amazon will, as you lower the price, Amazon will lower their price. They're pretty aggressive in trying to keep their own buy box. And so a lot of times, if Amazon jumps on your listing and you're there initially, it can zero out your margins really fast. And so in this particular case, I saw that this was selling really fast over the summer. And so I jumped on it and I just ordered a whole bunch of units to try to sell. And shortly after my product hit Amazon, Amazon jumped on the listing. And when I went back and looked at the Keepa graph, I realized that Amazon was on that listing like a month prior, and they were just out of stock when I ordered. And so when they came back online, it depressed the price. And so I tried to fight with them for a while, and then it turns out, I ended up losing. Okay. So this inventory level feature will be, I'm gonna talk about this in a second, but it's a really handy tool when you are selling wholesale. So we talked about product. I mentioned earlier, I try to go for high velocity products. So in that initial scan of your spreadsheet, I typically try to look now for products that are selling at least 60 products in a month. That's like my bare minimum. You'll see in some later examples, you'll see that I'm actually selling way more than that. And I'm looking to only order a 1 month supply. So none of that's changed.
60 products a month for you, or 60 products a month for everybody?
For me. So that's actually taking into account the amount of products being sold based on the BSR, divided by the amount of people that are currently on the listing. And if that leaves me 60 products, I'll consider actually selling it. Compute lead time. Again, what I try to do when I compute lead time is I start counting from when I make that order to when I make the first sale on Amazon. And from that standpoint, that's my lead time. And so I know the order, I try not to order no later than the 100% of that lead time. So if it takes 7 days from when I make an order to it gets into Amazon, I try not to order less than 7 days out before I run out of product. As you can see, I was spending a lot of money early on related to just buying a lot of products for wholesale. And so I didn't want to put all my own capital up at risk. And so what I found is especially, I don't know, have anybody ever dealt with like Coastal Federal Credit Union? They are very liberal on their lines of credit. And so if you're ever looking to open up a line of credit for Amazon or after you know that there's established products that are going to be selling, I would reach out to Coastal. It took like less than a couple of days for them to set me up a line of credit to start utilizing. American Express, their Business Plum card, that's another one. You have the ability to go up to 90 days net terms, and that can really help if you're running into any kind of cash flow issues. And then of course there's Amazon Lending. I've never used Amazon Lending before, but I think there may be some people in this room that have used them. And I heard that they have very good rates as it relates to their business loans.
And that line of credit with Coastal Federal, that was not your personal line of credit, that was a separate one for the business, is that right?
I just used my personal.
You did? Okay.
I guess I could have used my business, but I'm one of those people that, you know, I didn't want to go through the actual paperwork, and
Right.
it was just like, oh, well, what did they say? Just give me your social, and, you know, and they just ran my credit and gave it to me that way. But you can do it both ways. I don't see it being an issue on the other end. I talked about earlier, negotiate. A lot of times when you get that initial supplier file, the prices on that file don't necessarily represent the best price that you can get. So if you start reordering with the supplier over and over again, and they see that you are a net positive for their business, they will be willing to negotiate prices down. So a lot of times you may have only gotten a margin of maybe 10 to 15%. That margin can then turn to 20 to 30 to 40%, all by just negotiating. And as for price discounts, again, it may require you to order more than a month of items. So my normal rule is I may order only a month, but if they can give me a price discount, I may consider ordering more. And of
What
course,
would be the max that you'd be comfortable with?
it depends on the item. 2 months right now, what I've seen is kind of like my max. Again, it depends on the item and the amount of sellers that are on it.
Okay.
So my favorite tools to use that I've started using. How many of you guys have heard of Sellix?
Tom?
Yeah, he's great for Amazon. So Sellix is a tool that I use mainly for inventory spying and revenue tracking. And Repricer Express, I just recently got into using a repricer. I told Ryan about it a few weeks ago, and it's actually working pretty well. This repricer is actually more robust than the Amazon repricer. But before I say that, how many of you guys have used a repricer before or understand what a repricer does? So it's a small amount of people in here. All right, so what a repricer does is, how many of you guys have gone to Amazon before on one day or 1 hour and then come back a few minutes later and then the price has changed? Okay. A lot of times that's being done automatically with a repricer. And so sellers use repricers to try to gain competitive advantage, because typically in order to get the buy box, in order to sell on Amazon, they try to go with, Amazon tries to give the buy box to the lowest price, you know, outside of some other algorithmic magic. They typically go for the lower price. So sellers will try to fight for the buy box by lowering their prices, usually by a penny below the next best seller. And so repricers will do this automatically for you. Amazon has their own repricer. However, it's not very robust. You can't add as many rules to it that some of these third-party repricers can. And so Repricer Express is one of those repricers that I use. I'll talk about that in a second.
About Sellix, the inventory spying, whose inventory is on Amazon, so to speak, or?
Yeah, the inventory that's on Amazon. So similarly to the Helium 10 tool, but it has some extra functionality that I will talk about that I actually like as well. So inventory and spying with Sellix. Perfect transition. If you can't, you may not be able to see this, but you have, how many of you, like a lot of times, it's easy to figure out how fast something is selling when it's only one SKU. So it's just one item, no variations, it's just, you know, a simple widget. But when you run into, the problems happen when you run into a situation where, say you're selling shoes or socks or whatever, typically it's apparel, but where you have multiple SKUs and multiple sizes. But a lot of times the BSR, how fast the product is selling, is only based on one SKU or the combination of all the SKUs. And so you'll run into a situation where you think you have a hot selling product and you order it and then realize it's not selling. So what I like about Sellix will actually go in and you can put in one SKU and it'll actually day by day look to see how much of a product has sold on all of their SKUs. So you can see, well, you may not be able to see, but like this says that this item sells 43 units daily. However, you have all these different colors. And so If you didn't know that, you may have just bought the first color that you had access to. But now you know that, no, out of these 43, 12 of them are being sold by the black bottle, 9 of them are being sold by the red bottle, and then maybe 6 are being sold by this blue one, and then everybody else kind of falls in line for that. So what Celix allows you to do is get more competitive intelligence related to items that they have multiple variations.
Do you find it to be pretty accurate?
Yes, because I'm actually selling this exact product.
What product was that?
It's the Bottle Keeper Standard 2.0.
Thank you.
The other thing I like about Celix, this was like yesterday's data, is that how many of you guys ever run into a situation where you're selling a lot of stuff, but you don't know how much you really made for that day? So Celix will tie into your Amazon account. You program Celix with all of your information about how much the product costs you from the supplier, how much did it cost to ship it into Amazon. And so Celix keeps access of that information as your base product cost. And then it also keeps track of how much you actually sold that product for. And what I also like about it is that it keeps track based on even if you're repricing. So if you sold it at $20 one day and sold it at $19 the next day, Celix will keep all of that data and actually show you, well, hey, of all your sales, it'll keep an aggregate or an average of how much you actually sold that item for. And so yesterday's sales, with everything I was selling, I made a couple $100.
How does Celix, how does it integrate with your Amazon account?
So you have to give it API access to your Amazon account. So basically that's a way of saying programmatically you're giving Celix some access to your account.
So you have to give it authentication rights.
Yes.
Right there.
Did you say the cost for?
I'll go over that in a second, yeah. The other thing we talked about earlier is Repricer Express. So Repricer Express, I like again because you can set specific rules as it relates to repricing. One thing I've learned about repricing is that you should not reprice the same item the same way all the time. Or you shouldn't set one repricing rule for all of your items. Not only that, different sellers react differently to your repricing rules. And so what I like about Repricer Express or many of these third-party repricing programs is they will allow you to go in and reprice based on what other sellers are doing, reprice based on the time of day, reprice based on inventory, reprice on who has the buy box, who doesn't have the buy box. You can set all these different rules. You can't do that with Amazon's repricer. One thing I found, I'm selling these Weber grill accessories. I have one person who is a very aggressive repricer. And so if they drop their price, I'll drop my price. But we typically drop it by a penny each time. But what I've noticed with this seller is we'll hit a floor and they won't reprice anymore. And so once they hit their floor, I'll automatically reprice to my max. A few minutes later, they'll reprice to their max. And we'll start we'll start from like $77. We'll go all the way down to $75. Once we both hit 75, I'll reprice back to 77. They'll follow me back up, and we'll do the exact same thing all day. You can't do that with Amazon's reprice, but with something like this, you can. And so I'm sold on repricing now. Me and Ryan had a conversation about repricing, and I wasn't really into it as well either, but I just decided to take it out, and it works. And me and this other seller, we dominate the listing all day.
And here's what's good about that, like for people who haven't done it before, so what's happening is they're trading off, they're both getting more sales, because when the person who's 1 penny down gets that sale, then the next person gets the next sale. So it's like passing the ball back and forth all day long, but then they're going back up. So if they didn't go back up together, they would just price the product down to nothing and nobody would make anything. But because they're going back up together, they're making more money. So that's what's so great about that. If you haven't done it before, to understand like why he's laughing about it.
Hyperactive dollar cost averaging is what.
Pretty much. But it's like we're both, and we're fighting each other at the same time, but no other sellers actually no other sellers on that listing are repricing. We're the only two. So that's what makes it great. And the funny thing about it, Amazon's on that listing too. They're not doing anything. So repricing against competitors, there's just some things I wanted to talk about. Understand what your price floor is, and in my case, my price floor was $75. Don't race to the bottom. Only do it in 1 cent increments. Identify your aggressive reprices, i.e. like the example I just gave, and try to understand what they're doing. Because every aggressive repricer won't have a floor, they'll just keep going. And so in those cases, you can force them down, make them sell out of profit, sell out at a loss, and then bring your price up. So you can actually be the aggressor and just push them down. The other thing about this other repricer, reset your prices daily. Now mind you, in the example that I just gave, we were both moving back up at the end. Actually, we both moved back up once we hit our floors. But if you don't do that, what I found is that even if you reprice down, try to reprice to your max at midnight. For some reason, at least in my case, it's worked on quite a bit of products. Just reprice at midnight. People seem to all reset around that time. Again, my products that I'm selling, they all seem to reprice about midnight, and then we start it all over the next day.
And you could put all those rules in repricer?
You can put all those rules in a
repricer. You don't
repricer.
have to look at it?
Nope. Once you get it all set and you figured out the behavior of your competitors, once you get it all set, you can just use those rules.
Okay.
So cost. Sellex costs $60,000. Oh, not $60,000. I'm sorry. They have a 14-day free trial at $67 a month. Repricer Express. If you talk to support, you can get it for $40 a month and for 1,000 SKUs. I think their normal price is $55 a month for 2,500 SKUs, and it just goes up from there. But you email support and they'll give you a discount.
Got your question?
Yeah.
The sales tier, that's selling $60,000 a month, and you pay $67 for that?
Yeah, I'm not on that tier anymore. Not a month, I'm sorry. That's $60,000 cumulatively for a year. And so as you go up, they'll increase their price.
Okay.
I have a question. So how do you make someone drop their prices all the way down so that they sell out, but without hurting yourself?
Mm-hmm. So you have to understand their behavior. So yeah, his question is, how do you force somebody else to drop their prices and in a way that it doesn't negatively hurt you? What you have to do is understand how aggressive that person is. So for instance, some people, what I'll typically do is I'll match their price. If I match their price and they go lower, then I know I have somebody I can force down. Because if I'm just matching and they're just trying to go a penny lower than me, a lot of times in one case, I'm trying to remember exactly what I did for this person. Yes, so I would match their price, they would go a penny lower, then I'll drop my price like a dollar, and just to see what happens. And then if they go a penny lower than me, I just kept going until they hit their floor. And then once they hit their floor, I would just stay a penny above them. Now, I'm not looking to sell at that price because usually I'm losing money at that point, but I'm using the other tools to find out how much inventory they have. And if I know that they only have X amount of units and I can wait them out a day or so, I can force them out, then raise my price back and then sell at a profit. Other questions?
I'm sorry, I missed something. How do you know how much inventory they have? How do you figure that out?
So I have a tool in here called Helium 10, and it has a plugin. Well, Helium 10 is a plugin, and one of the aspects of that plugin is that you can click a button and it'll tell you how many units a person has in stock. And so I can watch that number and understand how I can attack somebody. How I can manipulate them to run out of stock and still make money.
Do you ever, I know one of your previous experiences said you work with them
Mhm.
Do you ever call them or email them and say, hey buddy, we're killing each other?
No, I think that's illegal.
No?
That's called, what is
Price
that?
fixing?
Price fixing, yeah. So I just base it on their behavior.
Okay.
I'm like, they don't know, and it's like, I guess, we've been doing this dance for a couple of months now, and I think they realize, well, I'm not gonna, we
Not
both
going
have our
anywhere.
established floors, and we both are doing the exact same behavior every night, or every day, so they've never contacted me, I've never contacted them, but I guess we just work on behavior. Pitfalls and failures, let's talk about those. So it's not all roses. I got access to this one supplier, and I saw that this product was selling really, really well. And it's the beginning of the spring, it was fertilizer. And I jumped in and I started selling it. And a few days later, Amazon shuts my listing down. And it turns out that this particular fertilizer was hazmat. And how many of you guys have heard of the Amazon hazmat program?
Just got an email.
Oh, you just got it?
About a month ago, yeah.
If you can get it, get in. I'll tell you about that in a second. I was not in a hazmat program at the time, and because of that, Amazon, what they did is they even though they shut down my listing, they told me what the product is. Then they said, well, we'll allow you to sell out, but you can't send this product in anymore until you become a part of the hazmat program. So that's exactly what I did. But then the hazmat program has a wait list, so you can't just request to get into the program. You have to wait. However, I emailed Jeff Bezos.
Again?
I did. And they told me there was this huge waiting list, and I was like, well, I'm going to email Jeff and see if I can get in. And literally 3 weeks later, I was in the hazmat program. So
That after his divorce proceedings, or?
yeah, I think it was during that time.
For more revenue?
So a lot of times if you have an issue, email. How many of you guys have heard that whole saying, email Jeff Bezos? Or is it Jeff at? You can email him if you have problems. It's not him per se, but it's his team that handles issues with Amazon or with your Amazon account. So that was like my first big thing. The second biggest thing was you get a product from a distributor, and you're able to sell it on Amazon, and then all of a sudden the distributor says, well, no, I don't want you selling anymore. I don't want anybody selling anymore. We know how much you're making on Amazon. We want to sell it. That's what happened to me with one of my other products. And so I ended up having to sell out of that inventory, and it was a pretty good margin product, but ended up losing out on that because of a change at the manufacturer. And then one of the biggest mistakes I made was that I ordered a lot of product. Up until that point, most of my products were coming to me via UPS or FedEx. So no big deal. FedEx trucks pulls up to my home. I take it out, or a lot of times I don't even have to be there. They just drop it at your home. Well, this particular case, it was shipped LTL. Didn't realize it at the time because I never had to deal with LTL. And an 18-wheeler shows up at my house. Not only that, I don't have, apparently when you deal with an 18-wheeler, you got to have, I guess, liftgate service. I didn't have that either. And so me and the truck driver are looking at each other like, hey, how are we going to work this out? And so long story short, he pulled the items to the edge of the truck, and then I just had to lift them and carry them into my garage. And the good thing about it, from his perspective, he was like, this is my last stop, so I didn't hold him up per se. But I learned at that point, I need to start looking at a fulfillment center, because I've outgrown my handheld operations. I don't think my neighbors like that either. So, everything that I've learned over the last 4 months, I started selling new products. What's different about this particular screen as it relates to the first one?
ROI.
They're green, and the ROI is a whole lot greater.
Yeah.
So what I found now in negotiating and just buying more products, or be willing to buy more from a supplier, you can get these prices lowered, a lot lower than what you initially could. And also, I'm when you find higher tier suppliers, you find more products that have greater margin already built in. So in this case, this is hey, I've never even heard of this product. So apparently you can electrify your charcoals to start the fire. I get $11 profit selling those. And that in the last month, this is my April numbers, I sold 128, so made $1,400 off of $5,700 spend. There's another product that I'm selling, 39% ROI. For 39% ROI. So making $5 a sale. I sold 110 of them last month. And again, better suppliers, more negotiation with your suppliers, you can get a higher ROI. Another product that I told you earlier, 50% ROI on this item. I did a small order, I ordered 66 of them for the last month. I just ordered a whole bunch more the other day. $10 profit per sale.
How long did it take you to move those? A month, 2 months?
So this was a month.
Month.
Yeah. And I probably could have moved more because I only.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So that's a no name, no brand.
It's I don't know. I've never heard of it.
That's a question.
So this apparently is a brand name. Bottle Keeper apparently is a brand name thing. I never heard of them, but again, I scanned a spreadsheet, one of those supplier spreadsheets. That's what popped up, and I was like, okay, I'll buy it. And it's sold, or it's selling.
$41 for a bottle.
Exactly. Who does that? How do these people do?
At least 66 people.
And again, that's something that you ship to your fulfillment, not your fulfillment center, but they.
Actually, I shipped this to my fulfillment center, and I don't have to because it's only like it's not a huge package. But I'm just getting into the habit of just getting out of the loop, and I'm sending everything to my fulfillment center now. And so this is one of the items I'm sending.
So I'm sorry.
I'm curious, okay, so how long, you only sold this 1 month?
This one, yeah, I've sold this one 1 month.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you think the life of a product that you're selling would be for you? 2 months, 6 months, a year?
So
You know what I'm getting at, right?
yeah, I know what you're getting at, longevity.
Right.
This particular product or any product, I'm averaging maybe, again, this is relatively, I don't have a lot of data,
Right.
but what I'm seeing, like the dog product, it's been out there for a while. And not too many people are on it because Amazon's on that listing. But I know I talked about where I will actually circle back to that in a second. What I'm finding, I don't know if you guys heard the news a while back that Amazon is getting off of, they got rid of their vendor program. And so a lot of listings that Amazon was on, they're actually either selling out a product or they're not as competitive on those prices anymore. I'm starting to see a lot of that in price action. One of the things that I'm doing is I'm looking at listings that I typically would stay away from and what I'm looking to see if Amazon's changing their price or is Amazon actually sharing the buy box. And I'm finding that in a lot of listings that I will stay away from, Amazon's selling out and they're not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And so that may change the game, at least for this, the upcoming year, because I don't see Amazon. Well, I'm just looking at the behavior. I'm also, again, if Amazon's not repricing aggressively, I'm looking to test out. I'll test out with a small batch. I'm actually doing that right now with some other stuff, and just see if Amazon will reprice down for me. And what I'm finding, they're not.
What is the reason behind that?
The reason from Amazon's change, I don't know. I just remember seeing the news article, it was a little over a month ago, that they stated that they were doing that. So I don't know why, but.
And the vendor program, is that where they were buying product from
Yes.
vendors and now they're not doing that anymore?
Mm-hmm. Correct. That was exactly what was happening. And I get you.
So how many sellers are on your listing?
This listing for this SKU, I think there's 3.
So it's really low.
Mm-hmm.
He's about to have 30 more.
Yeah. Actually,
Would you say that wholesaling is less risky than private labeling?
Yes, wholesale is definitely a lot riskier than private labeling if you follow the process. If you follow the process of identifying a product that sells, identifying that that product has margin, and that you can jump on that product and sell out within a month time frame, then those risks are mitigated.
That's been consistent with you when you follow that?
Yeah, back to the lifespan of the product. I mean, you can be on products for years, to be honest with you.
This man has experience too. He's just
You're typically going to have 3 to 4 months of data when you first start selling a product to realize if it will be a yearly product or not. You'll typically find out who your competition is. Is there any copyright to where you're not allowed to? Is the manufacturer coming after you to say, no, I don't want you on my listing? So you typically get that data pretty quickly if there is a big time seller that's perhaps out of stock for 1 to 2 months, and then they come back. So now you're sitting on maybe $10,000, $20,000 in inventory. And I would say if it's a higher selling product, especially if it's a bigger brand, years. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions? Concerns? I'm opening up for just open Q&A in a second.
Good job.
I have a question. Is there any correlation between how much you make return on investment per item and volume?
Yeah. So what I find is like the higher volume items, the ROI is typically a little bit lower. But again, the lower volume items, it kind of, what you typically want to do is get a whole bunch of items that are selling either high velocity and low velocity to kind of bring your overall ROI up. So that's the technique that I'm following now. Yep. So I started this as an experiment in January, right? I cleared out everything and I was like, okay, I'm going to go straight wholesale in January. At the end of January, I only made about $3,600 in sales, and I think my profit on that was like maybe around 10% profit on those sales numbers. But February came around, I got a few more suppliers. It got up to $5,000 yippee. So I ended up again about maybe it's like $600 of that was profit. Then March rolled around. I actually started really honing in on new suppliers and understanding cash flow and things like that. And I got up to $19,000 in sales. And this month that just closed, these are my sales numbers: $46,000 in sales for the month of April, and $6,675 of that was pure profit. And so now, basically what I'm doing now is looking to just continue that curve up. I have some strong suppliers, and cash flow issues are taken care of for the most part, and I'm just looking to scale that up. Okay.
And this graph is representing all of your products that you're selling on Amazon?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so this number is just for April, but yeah, this graph right now is just the numbers for my specific wholesale account.
So with those numbers and with your profit, how much time and how much of you goes into making that happen?
So early on, there was a lot of time. I probably, because I focused on this full time, but I focused on the wrong things. So the first couple of months, I probably spent maybe 4 to 8 hours a day just focused on it. But once I got into March and in April, that time dropped to maybe a couple of hours a day. So now, because of what ended up happening, I streamlined my supplier process. I streamlined actually my prep process, and I'm looking now to try to just get a VA to actually reach out to more suppliers instead of myself having to do it. So I'm systematically bringing myself out of the process. And so it's actually gotten easier as it's.
How do you automatically upload your products to Amazon?
How do it now?
How do you automatically upload your products to Amazon?
Automatically?
Like, do you have to actually, I don't know, take each image or put that?
No, okay, so yeah, let's back up. So his question was, how do you automatically upload your products to Amazon? So you're not necessarily automatically creating a brand new listing. because you're coming from a private label standpoint where you're creating a listing and taking pictures
Oh,
and writing a
it's just
description.
one listing with all the sellers
Yeah,
there.
these are listings that have already established listings that you can basically piggyback on top of. So you don't have to worry about any of that.
So how many products in April did you have online?
So
Round figures.
probably about 11.
Only 11 products.
I'll actually probably tell you. I should have thought more. I will tell you here in a second.
Probably less than what you started out with.
Yeah.
So you're saying
Yeah.
you streamline yourself as you're going along. That makes more sense.
I will tell you here in a second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. 10 products for that number.
How many products did you do your first month?
Oh man, I was.
Yeah, streamlining yourself into
I
the
was.
most efficient products.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happens. You find the more efficient products, and a lot of times what you'll find is the products that you're selling that are very efficient. If you look at your competitors' listings, you'll see they're selling many of the same efficient products. And usually, like those first 2 to 3 pages of a listing, of a competitor's listing, are their best products. Everything, even if they're selling like 30,000 products or whatever, look at those first 3 pages and try to find those products. And that's what helped with this growth curve. Me doing exactly that. But
what was your process in even picking out what suppliers to look at?
What suppliers to look at?
Yeah.
Again, initially, it was basically what I was stating earlier. I went to wholesalecentral.com. Again, that was a lot of, some of them were good, but most of them was crap. Then I started going to different Facebook groups and talking to people there. Most people there are going to be very tight-lipped, but there are a few couples that may throw out, hey, I'm selling this, or one person, they posted a screenshot of their pallet that they were about to ship to Amazon. And right there on the pallet, they didn't blink it out, was a supplier. I could actually zoom in and find a supplier there. So, just different ways like that. The other main way, again, looking at the UPC code and Googling wholesaler, that helped with quite a few. Some of those still I'm selling, some of them I'm not, because again, there's a process where some stuff you're selling, maybe the first couple of months is great, then others, then you find out, well, I can't sell it, or the manufacturer doesn't want you to sell it anymore. My best supplier, to be honest, is I just Googled item name and wholesaler and found it. So that's kind of been like my methodology. The latest thing that I've gotten into are supplier lists. I have a couple of supplier lists that I have yet to fully go through. There are probably about 80 or 90 suppliers, and I just haven't had the time to actually call each one, which is why I need a VA to do that, or help with that process.
So I'm assuming you didn't like zero in on that bottle keeper or whatever it was called initially?
No,
You know,
no.
That was just on somebody's supply.
That was on somebody, that was on, the bottle keeper was inside of a supplier's SKU list. And when I analyzed it, I saw it. And so,
Is there such a thing as a mini launch for wholesaling? I know for private labeling, just to kind of figure out the whole process, because I actually haven't sold anything yet.
you said a mini launch?
Yeah, a mini launch. No? All right, beginner question.
No, yeah, I'm trying to think of beginner. I think a beginner launch would be, if you've never done it before, I would start with just RAing and just seeing. I have a love-hate relationship with that word, but just getting used to the Amazon platform as it relates to sending things in. Then after that, just seeing if you can just land a supplier or two, and even if you can just break even, you'll at least learn the process. And then from there, start looking for suppliers that actually are profitable.
Thank you. The second question, is there a course you'd recommend for wholesaling? I know there are a ton of courses for private labeling online.
Let's see. Okay. Full disclosure, I find courses on the internet, and I typically, if they're there, I will access them. if you search hard enough, in Google words like get wholesale course or things like that, you will find that people share courses out there. I know I'm saying this on the thing. I'm just being straight honest with you guys. I'm very transparent.
You can edit it later.
I can edit it later. There's a guy, his name is Bo Crable. He has a pretty good wholesaling course. It's pretty in-depth as it relates to this exact process. I've tweaked his stuff quite a bit, but the baseline is there.
What was that last name?
Say it again.
Bo, B-E-A-U, Crable, C-R-A-B-I-L-L. He's a young kid. I think he's about 20 now.
Man.
It's killing it.
Yeah, he's doing really well. But
Is there any value on Amazon to sticking with a niche? And I think I know the answer to this, but just curious from anyone who's done a lot of wholesaling. So like, for example, I manufacture a product that is more like the jewelry making niche, and I have been playing around with, you know, wholesaling products that go along with that. But on Amazon, does it matter if you are cohesive in the type of products you're selling? It doesn't really matter, does it?
no, it doesn't. Like I said,
Okay.
I've seen listings where there are 30,000 products and
All across the
they're
board.
all across the board.
Okay.
So, yeah. Like I said, I will sell what sells.
So how much time are you putting in now? Like, I mean, is it like a 50-hour a week?
No. I don't have. So right now, I'm probably spending maybe a couple hours a day on this. So, and that's by choice because part of it's by choice and part of it's because I've streamlined the major things out. The receiving packages at my house and shipping them. That streamlined a lot of my time. So I used to get packages daily to my home, and now I don't have to deal with that anymore.
Okay.
So basically, the extra time that is looking for suppliers.
So, sounds more like you're working on your business as opposed to in your business now.
Yeah, and that was the whole point, is to get to that point. It took 4 months, but I mean, it got there.
James, when you know how they're building the Amazon warehouse in Garden, is there any chance that they will accept packages without, you know, people coming with their boxes? I mean, is that ever allowed?
I don't think
It's gotta
so.
be all through the normal process.
Normal process, right.
Mine's dead.
See,
That probably would never happen because when you list your items, they tell you where it's gonna get shipped to. So-
they tell you where, but you can kind of manipulate that as well. A lot of times they'll tell you, most of the time things go to Charlotte, but there are a lot of instances where they'll want you to send some things like to Baltimore and then somewhere in the Midwest and then out to California. And you can manipulate that. A lot of times, if you just keep recreating the shipping plan, they'll eventually send you to Charlotte. And then the latest thing I've noticed that if you just create it as a case of items instead of individual items, they'll automatically ship it to one location. And a lot of times it's Charlotte.
Okay, just my,
Go ahead.
since I'm very, very new at this, what is the difference and what are the difference and the benefits of me fulfilling the orders myself or shipping to a fulfillment center?
So when you say fulfilling them yourself, what do you mean?
I mean, the order comes to me and I fulfill it and I ship it to.
Merchant
whoever.
fulfillment.
Oh, merchant fulfill. So
Yeah.
in this particular game, it's best for Amazon to do it because you'll get access to the buy box. A lot of times, merchant fulfill people, unless your price is low enough, you won't get access to the buy box. Thus, you won't get seen by sellers. So if you just let Amazon take care of it, yes, Amazon's going to take their fee, but a lot of times you'll make it up in volume.
There's an exception to that, but you gotta come next month.
Okay.
And also run the numbers, because I ran my numbers when I quit my full-time job to do this, and it honestly wasn't gonna, if I count my time in it, wasn't gonna save me any money to do it myself.
Right.
So I'd rather market and sell.
Well, is
than-
there a minimum or max or that you have to send to them? I'm sorry.
I don't, and it might be different for her category, but I've never run into one. I've sent 3 things before. So.
Yeah, I've sent one, so
Yeah.
I don't think there's a min.
Can you do something similar with other platforms in case something goes wrong with Amazon eventually? Can you do this with Shopify and, I don't any other platform?
You can, like you mentioned Shopify, the only issue with Shopify, and I think you're the expert on this, is that you're gonna have to bring people to your Shopify site versus people are already going to Amazon. Now, I did just get an email from Walmart to be a part of their marketplace. But I think even with Walmart's not fulfilling the stuff for you. You actually have to fulfill it yourself. So that's neither here nor there. But there's Walmart, there's Wish, there's
Overstock, I think.
yeah, I guess Overstock, and of course
eBay.
Old Faithful eBay. Any other questions? Hey, you can ask.
Great question.
How do we get access to the slides?
I'll give them to Bill, and Bill will email it to everybody who signed the list.
And we're recording it.
Good job to do.
You had mentioned about, I guess, competing with Amazon in listings?
Yes. Okay, yeah, let's go back there. So competing with Amazon with listings. So what I've noticed again, I restate this, I've noticed that Amazon is not as aggressive on quite a few listings that they used to be as aggressive on. So what and actually it's funny, I say all of this and I'm discovering this, that somebody made a course on it just a few weeks ago, which is neither here nor there. But what I found is that if this helps with the old Keepa, even it helps with if you use Keepa to find this out. If Amazon's on the listing and there are sales that are happening on the Keepa graph under either above Amazon's price, a lot of times you'll realize that Amazon is actually sharing that buy box.
Sure.
If Amazon's price is stable via the Keepa graph, meaning that let me see, is there something yeah, perfect. So typically, if you look at a Keepa graph, it'll look something like this. And if Amazon's on the listing, it'll be all orange below here. So that means like Amazon's at this price and Amazon's on this listing the entire time. So this can be like for a month or a year or so on and so forth. But what I've noticed is that if you start seeing triangles like down here, Amazon's not necessarily repricing to meet these sales. Basically, these triangles are sales from FBA sellers that are on that same listing. If you see a lot of these, even though Amazon's consistently on this listing, Amazon's not repricing against those people.
Okay.
And that's what I'm starting to notice a lot of recently. Like, a year ago or 6 months ago, this wasn't the case. But on a lot of products that I'm scanning, and you would think that Amazon would be repricing on, they're not anymore.
What's interesting is I had one like that, but I didn't know this is what was happening. But I would go and have no sales on it, and then all of a sudden I'd sell 4 or 5 in a day, and then no sale. Like it would go in these weird spurts, and it was Amazon giving me the buy box, I think.
That's exactly what was happening.
Oh, wow. Oh, cool.
So that opens up a whole new bunch of products that you can get on that you normally would have stayed away from.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions, concerns? Our hearts and minds are in one accord. I need to do devotion.
Thank you for sharing.
So let's get off the fence and start selling.
Yes. Thank you.
No problem, no problem.
I have one question. You said you had, for April, you had 10 products.
Yes.
How many did you have in January?
That's why I can't remember, because I just threw a bunch of stuff at the wall to try to see what stuck. And I probably had maybe double that. Because I look back at my account, there are a lot of products that were there that I'm not selling anymore. And it was only because they either were slow movers or they didn't have a lot of profit. Or the company said, hey, we don't want you selling these anymore. So, but once I figured that out and started focusing on, like in my case, a lot of the items I'm focusing on are spring and summer related, like again, like fertilizer,
Sprayers.
things for your pool, your barbecue grill stuff, those are selling. So I'm looking, because so basically I'm trying to look ahead a few more months. Okay, what's going to be selling in the late summer and into the fall and things like that. So I'm trying to line up suppliers for those things as well.
Is there a way you can kind of find a listing of what they might have on their hazmat?
I've been looking for that. Okay. I'm glad you reminded me. Because, so Amazon, if you search, let me see if I can find it. They don't have an extensive list of items that you can look at and say hazmat, hazmat, hazmat. But if you Google Amazon hazmat tool, you can put it in by ASIN, and you can scan the ASIN, and Amazon will tell you if that ASIN is hazmat before you even list it into your account. So Google the Amazon hazmat tool. Now, you have the ability to.
They made a mistake. I had 4 books that had chemicals related to them, and they told me that I was on the hazmat list, and then they sent me something back a couple weeks later and said, we made a mistake, sorry. But it was books about chemicals.
Okay. Now, I will say this, and I'm starting to see this as well. If you can get into the Amazon hazmat program and find products that are quote unquote hazmat to sell, I'm finding that they actually have pretty good margins. And there's not a lot of sellers in them because the program is so small. And so, for instance, I just got in the program and I'm going to be selling, I just sent in some products to sell. They are pool shop chemicals. And I think I'm probably going to make about 30% ROI on those. That's actually with all the hazmat fees getting it there. Because when you sell something hazmat, you can't use their partner carriers. You actually have to use your own or your fulfillment center's carriers, and so they have to take that risk on themselves. But even with that, I'm still going to make out pretty well.
You say you have to apply for that program?
Yes. So there's 2 ways to apply. You can actually go and apply, and how do you apply? You can send a message to seller support and ask to be put on a wait list. Or the other way is you can send a product into Amazon that's hazmat, and they'll automatically put you on the list. Now they won't let you sell their product, and they'll complain that, hey, this is hazmat, but they will put you on the hazmat list to sell. So I know I covered a lot of information here. I did see some glazed over eyes here, so if you have any questions, just throw them out.
I have a cool question.
Oh, go ahead.
What are the, what should one look out for, the dangers of, losing, what is the most likely way to lose money with this?
The most likely way to lose money is not, you make your money, as they say, somebody said it here. On the buy. You make your money on the buy. So when you are looking to purchase that product, look at its price history on Amazon. If its price history dips below a point where you can be profitable, I'd be a little bit wary of purchasing that product and maybe moving on to something else. So that's where you really need to focus.
So it sounds like related, not doing proper and thorough research.
Yes, that's correct. You just throw me all these nice curveballs. Well,
big fat pitches.
Yeah. Yes, product research.
So you're never afraid of it just not selling at all?
Not now, because I'm doing the research up front, and I'm spying on my listings. I'm looking at the BSR. I'm looking at the amount of sellers that are on the listing, things like that. All of that lowers the risk on me purchasing that product.
So you're able to discern pretty quickly whether, as you're working with a supplier, if it's
Usually within. So typically what I do, if I scan a supplier list and I see that there's say 3 or 4 items on that list, and I'm like, okay, these are items I may want to sell. Next thing I'll do is I'll look and see if Amazon's selling it. If Amazon's not selling it, I'll look to see how fast it's selling. And that's usually based on the BSR, figuring out how the BSR has been over a certain period of time. And then at the same time, I still might not order that product day one. I'll put it into the Selix program and see the amount of items that are being sold by other sellers, and that'll let me know, hey, this is something I can really sell. So those processes let me know that, hey, I can sell this product with hardly any worries.
About how long does it take you now with the experience you have with the product?
For that, I'll say about a week.
Okay.
After I've gotten to that point, I've gotten it down that funnel. The Selix process takes the longest because I usually want a week's worth of data to determine whether or not this is going to be a good product to buy.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, I'm sorry because I'm so done with this.
No, it's
but
fine.
not at all. So when you put an item up there, is there anything you can do to draw more attention to your listing or to get people, I mean, if you got, all of us are selling the same thing and it all shows up, is there something that we can do to draw people to our listing instead of to your listing?
So,
Is there anything besides
I'll-
price?
So usually price is going to be it. All things being equal, price is going to be the determining factor in wholesale. But again, going back to what I was stating earlier, and I may have not actually hit on this earlier. When I'm looking to purchase a product, I look at two things. I'm looking at how much the product is selling. How fast the product is selling. Meaning, if can I sell 1,000 units in a month or whatever, or if the product is selling 1,000 units in a month, then I'll look to see, okay, how many other people are selling, and based on that, I'm looking to sell that amount. So if it's selling 1,000, 4 people are on it, I jump on the listing. That means there's 200 sales for me. I'm looking to sell 200. As long as I get 200, I'm happy. And I'll move to the next product.
Is there anything you do like you get seller's rating? You just let that happen?
Yeah, I just let it happen. I don't even
just let it
solicit.
happen. You don't. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And again, with the other order, I guess there is something you can do. It's still price related. To begin, it's the whole repricing thing, where you can still get more sales via repricing, but again, you have to understand the behavior of everybody else on that listing. So, there are no more questions. There's more. But,
You'll stick around
Yeah, I
for a
usually
while.
just hang out. I will let you guys go.
Thank you.
Nice.